Somewhere in the north of Brazil, before dawn, a man ties a rope around his ankles and climbs a tree that leans 80 feet over black water. He does this maybe 40 times before the sun is fully up. His name is carried on the same river his father used, and his grandfather before that. In his baskets are small purple berries that will be eaten as sorbet on a beach in Rio, blended into a bowl in California, sold as a superfood in a city he will never see. He has never left the forest. The forest has never left him. And somewhere far to the south, at the exact same hour, 3,000 police officers move into a hillside neighborhood of Rio de Janeiro with armored cars and drones. By the end of that day, more than 100 people will be dead. It will be the deadliest raid in the country's history. Same country, same morning, two worlds that barely know the other exists, and between them, 3 more time zones of Brazil still waiting for the sun. This is Brazil, and the truth about Brazil is the one thing almost nobody says out loud. The world thinks it knows this place. Carnival, football, the beach, the rainforest on a postcard, a giant statue with its arms open over the sea. But that Brazil is a thumbnail. The real one doesn't fit on a screen. It doesn't fit in a sentence. It barely fits on a map. Because Brazil is not one country, it is a dozen countries wearing the same flag. And the story of Brazil is the story of a nation so enormous, so contradictory, so impossible to hold in a single hand, that it has spent 500 years trying to become one thing and never quite managing it. Let me show you the size of the problem. Brazil covers 8.5 million square kilometers. It is larger than the entire continental United States without Alaska. It touches every country in South America except 2. If you laid it over Europe, it would stretch from Portugal to the middle of Russia. It holds 213 million people. 1 in every 2 human beings in South America is Brazilian. There are more Brazilians than there are people in Russia, more than in every country in Western Europe combined. And here is the number that breaks the mind. Brazil spans 4 time zones. When the sun rises over the Atlantic beaches of the east, it is still the middle of the night on its western border, a single country, and dawn arrives in installments. How do you govern that? How do you feel like one people across a landmass where the weather in one corner has nothing to do with the weather in another, where the accent changes every few hundred kilometers, where a family in the frozen south and a family on the equator share a passport and almost nothing else? For 5 centuries, that has been the question, and the answers Brazil has tried are some of the strangest, boldest, and bloodiest experiments any nation has ever attempted. The great river gives up its secrets slowly, and so does the country built around it. To understand the fracture, you have to go back to the wound. The year is 1500. A Portuguese navigator named Pedro Cabral, aiming for the tip of Africa, drifts too far west and stumbles onto a coastline no European had claimed. He plants a flag. The land falls, by the stroke of an earlier treaty with Spain, into Portugal's half of the world. What the Portuguese found was not empty. Millions of indigenous people already lived across the land that would become Brazil. Hundreds of nations, hundreds of languages. Within a century, disease and forced labor had shattered them, and into that gap, the colonizers poured a horror on a scale the modern mind can barely process. Between the 16th and 19th centuries, an estimated 4.9 million enslaved Africans were landed on Brazilian shores. Read that number again. Nearly 5 million human beings in chains. That is roughly 46% of every enslaved person brought to the entire New World. Double the number taken to the whole British Caribbean. More than 12 times the number taken to the United States. Brazil was not a place that used slavery. Brazil was, for 350 years, a machine built on it. Sugar first, in the fertile northeast, in places like Bahia and Pernambuco. Then gold, in the mountains of Minas Gerais. Then coffee, on the plains of the southeast. Every wave of wealth rode on the backs of the enslaved. And Brazil held on longer than anyone. It was the last country in the entire Western Hemisphere to abolish slavery. Not until the 13th of May, 1888, when a princess signed a law just 18 words long. Article 1. As of this date, slavery is declared abolished. Article 2. All provisions to the contrary are revoked. 18 words to end 3.5 centuries. And here is the cruelty inside the mercy. There was no plan for what came after. No land, no schools, no compensation for the freed. More than 1 million people were released into a country that had spent generations telling them they were property, and then simply told to make their own way. The chains came off. The fracture stayed. You can see that fracture in the numbers today. More than half of Brazil identifies as black or mixed race, one of the largest populations of African descent anywhere on Earth outside Africa itself. And that same population makes up 2/3 of the country's prisoners and the great majority of its poorest. The Brazil of the beach and the Brazil of the favela are not two different countries. They are the same wound, 137 years apart. But the enslaved were never only victims. They resisted, with revolts, with escapes, with entire hidden nations. Deep in the interior, they built quilombos, settlements of escaped slaves, self-governed, keeping alive the African cultures the colonizers had tried to erase. The most famous, Palmares, sheltered as many as 20,000 people in the 17th century under a leader named Zumbi, whose name Brazilians still speak with reverence. Palmares fell in 1695. Its spirit did not. And those communities are still here. In the state of Pará today, descendants of Quilombos still farm the land their ancestors fled to. One of them, a forest defender named Darlon Neres dos Santos, describes the pressure they live under from land grabbing, mining, and the endless advance of agribusiness. The communities are going to disappear, he says, and we don't know our future. 500 years after Cabral planted his flag, the people at the bottom of Brazil are still holding the line and still being told the future is not theirs. The great river gives up its secrets slowly. Some of them it would rather bury. But here is the question that haunts the whole story. If Brazil is so vast, so fractured, so full of worlds that barely touch, why is it still one country at all? Look at the rest of the continent. The Spanish Empire in the Americas broke into more than a dozen separate nations. Argentina, Chile, Peru, Colombia, and on, fragmenting in wars and revolutions. By every logic, Portuguese America should have done the same. It was even bigger. Its cities were separated by vast emptiness and dense forest, so isolated that, in the words of one history, Brazil was a scattering of disconnected conglomerates of people. And then history did something it had never done before. The year is 1808. Napoleon's armies march on Portugal. And rather than surrender, the entire Portuguese royal court, the king, the nobles, the whole apparatus of an empire, packs onto ships and flees across the Atlantic to Rio de Janeiro. For the first time in history, a European monarch ruled his empire not from Europe, but from the Americas. A colonial capital became an imperial one overnight. Cinnamon was strewn in the streets. When the king eventually sailed home, he left his son behind. And in 1822, that son did not lead a war of liberation like the rest of the continent. He simply declared, on the banks of a river near São Paulo, independence, and had himself crowned emperor. Brazil became something almost unique in the New World. An independent monarchy, an empire, ruled by emperors named Pedro for most of the 19th century. That is the answer. That is why Brazil did not shatter into 20 countries the way Spanish America did. A single crown, a single throne, held the impossible expanse together through the decades when it could most easily have flown apart. The monarchy did not fix the fracture. It kept slavery, it kept the hierarchy, it kept the poor in their place. But it did one thing no republic on the continent managed. It kept the giant whole. Brazil is one nation today because, for a crucial century, one family sat on a throne and refused to let it come apart. Everything since, Brasilia, the highways, the flag, the anthem, has been an attempt to finish the job that Crown began, to turn a landmass into a people. But holding a country together is not the same as letting everyone into it. And there is one Brazil that has been shut out of the national dream longer than any other. Go inland from the beaches of the northeast, away from Salvador, away from Recife, past the green coastal strip where the sugar grew, and the land changes fast. Within 100 kilometers, the color drains out of it. This is the Sertão, a vast semi-arid backland of thorn and cactus and stunted gray trees called caatinga, spread across Bahia, Pernambuco, Piauí, Ceará. Brazilians call it, without affection, the drought polygon. Rain here averages under 800 millimeters a year, and it does not come reliably. Some years it does not come at all. The people of this land are the Sertanejos, and their history is a long argument with the sky. The year is 1877. The rains fail. They fail again in 1878, and again in 1879, 3 years in a row. It becomes known simply as the Grande Seca, the Great Drought, and it is remembered as the worst in Brazilian history. Estimates of the dead vary widely by source, from around 200,000 to as many as 500,000 people. Refugees poured out of the backlands by the hundreds of thousands, some to the Amazon, to be swallowed by the rubber boom, some south to the cities. They were called the flagelados, the beaten ones, and the empire in Rio, the same monarchy that had held the giant together, largely looked away. Pleas from the hardest hit state went unanswered. When aid finally came, it was badly distributed. Some intellectuals of the day even argued that the people of the Sertão had been shaped by the climate into something lesser, incapable, by nature, of modern life. A country too vast for one world had decided that one of its worlds did not quite count. So the Sertão did what people do when a nation abandons them. It built its own. The year is 1893. In the Bahian backlands, a wandering preacher named Antonio Conselheiro, the counselor, founds a settlement called Canudos. Poor farmers, freed slaves, the drought-driven, the dispossessed. They come by the thousands. They build a town of more than 2,000 dwellings. They dig irrigation. They keep communal stores. They reject the money and the authority of the new republic that had just overthrown the emperor. At its height, Canudos holds around 25,000 people. It becomes, briefly, the second largest settlement in the entire state of Bahia. A community of the poorest people in Brazil, feeding itself, governing itself, in the harshest land in the country. And the young republic could not tolerate it. 3 military expeditions were sent. 3 were beaten back by farmers with old rifles, so the state sent a 4th, with artillery. In October 1897, Canudos was destroyed. The estimates of the dead run from 15,000 to 30,000. Effectively, the entire settlement, including mass killings of those who surrendered. The town was razed to the ground. Sit with that for a moment. In the same decade, Brazil abolished slavery and declared itself a modern republic. It annihilated a town of its own citizens for the crime of surviving without it. Canudos is the darkest sentence in this whole story, and it is the truest one. Brazil has never quite decided whether the people at its margins are Brazilians or obstacles. That question was asked in the Sertão in 1897. It was asked again on a Rio hillside in October 2025. It gets asked every single election. And still, the Sertão endures. The Caatinga is the only major biome found nowhere on Earth but Brazil. A forest that sheds its leaves and looks dead for months, then explodes into green within days of the first rain. The Sertanejos have a saying about this land, and it doubles as a description of themselves. It does not die, it waits. The great river gives up its secrets slowly. The dry land keeps its own and tells no one. Now, having seen the wound, the thread that held it together, and the people it left behind, let's go to where the country is loudest and where it hides the most. The year is 1960. A president named Juscelino Kubitschek makes a promise that sounds insane. He will build a brand new capital city from nothing in the empty center of the country. Not a town that grows into a city over generations, a capital, fully formed, in the middle of a plateau where, in his own planner's words, only cattle ranching existed. He gives them 41 months. Think about that. A national capital with a Congress, a Supreme Court, ministries, cathedrals, palaces, conjured out of dry scrubland in less than 4 years. The architect Oscar Niemeyer designs buildings that look like they landed from the future. Curves instead of corners. He once said he was not attracted to the hard, inflexible straight line made by man, but to the free-flowing curves he found in the mountains and rivers of his country. And on the 21st of April 1960, Brasilia is inaugurated, a city dreamed into a wilderness. Why would anyone do this? Why drag the capital away from the beaches of Rio, away from the ocean, into the interior where nobody lived? Because that was the whole point. Brazil's entire history had huddled against the Atlantic coast. The people, the money, the power, all pressed up against the sea, backs turned to the vast interior. The founders of the Republic knew it. They wrote it into the Constitution as far back as 1891, by move the capital inland, force the country to face itself. Brasilia was a bet that if you put the heart of the nation in the empty middle, the body would follow, that a country too vast for one world could be stitched together by an act of pure will. It half worked. Brasilia is a city of nearly 3 million now, with the highest income per person of any major city in Latin America. But it was also, from the start, divided. The wealthy in the design center, everyone else pushed to sprawling suburbs miles away. A monument to unity that quietly reproduced the exact inequality it was built to erase. That is the Brazilian pattern, and you will see it again and again. A magnificent dream, a real achievement, and underneath it, the old division, never quite healed. Before we leave the interior, look southeast to the engine that actually runs the country. São Paulo, more than 12 million people in the city itself, around 22 million across its metropolitan sprawl, the largest city in the entire southern hemisphere. One state, São Paulo, holds 46 million people. That is more than 1 in 5 Brazilians. If it were a country, it would be larger than most in Europe. It generates a staggering share of the nation's wealth. Roughly a tenth of Brazil's entire economy pours out of this one restless, grey, endless city of concrete and helicopters and traffic that swallows hours of every life. This is the Brazil almost no tourist photographs. No beach, no jungle, no statue, just work, towers to the horizon. The financial capital of South America, built by wave after wave of immigrants, Italians, Japanese, Lebanese, Portuguese, layered on top of the descendants of the enslaved, who were moved south to the coffee fields when the Northeast's economy collapsed. Because that is the other engine, the one hidden in the soil. Brazil is an agricultural superpower on a scale that reshapes the whole planet's dinner table. It is the world's largest exporter of soy, of beef, of coffee, of orange juice, of sugar. When the price of your morning coffee moves, it usually moves because of something that happened in Brazil. Nearly a third of the coffee Americans drink every day comes from these plains. And here, the two Brazils collide most violently, because that same agribusiness, the soy and the cattle, is the single largest driver of the destruction of the forest we are about to visit. In 2025, agricultural expansion accounted for 99% of the native vegetation cleared across the country. The wealth that feeds the world is eating the wilderness that regulates its climate. One country, holding the knife and the wound. How do you feed 213 million people and export food to billions more without burning the very thing that keeps the rain falling? Brazil has never answered that question. It just keeps trying to hold both. Now travel north, far north, off the map that most of the world carries in its head. Here is the fact nobody tells you about the Amazon. Most of it belongs to Brazil. 60% of the largest rainforest on Earth sits inside this one country. It is not a wilderness at the edge of Brazil. It is Brazil, a third of the entire nation, a green ocean the size of a continent, drained by a river that carries more water than the next 7 largest rivers on the planet combined. And it is, right now, the site of the most important environmental fight in the world. For years, the story went only one direction, down. The forest burning, shrinking, bleeding. In 2022, deforestation hit a brutal peak. Whole regions vanished into smoke. But something has shifted. In the 12 months ending in mid-2025, deforestation fell to its lowest level in over a decade. In the first half of 2026, clearing dropped again, down 38% from the year before, the lowest for that period since 2016. The government credits stronger enforcement. Independent monitors broadly agree the trend is real. And yet, hold that good news in one hand, because you'll need the other for what comes next. In October 2025, just weeks before Brazil hosted the world's climate summit, the government granted its own oil company a license to drill for oil near the mouth of the Amazon River. The basin there may hold up to 10 billion barrels. The energy minister called it the future of the nation's sovereignty. Environmental campaigners called it a betrayal of everything the country claimed to stand for. This is Brazil in a single frame. A president who cut deforestation in half and then opened a new oil frontier. A country that shelters the lungs of the planet and needs to sell what lies beneath them. The forest that everyone wants Brazil to save, and that Brazil alone must pay to keep standing. Who gets to make that choice? The world that demands the forest be protected, or the country that has to feed 213 million people? And here is what almost nobody outside Brazil understands about that choice. The forest is not just Brazil's lungs, it is Brazil's plumbing. The Amazon breathes an astonishing amount of water into the sky. The trees release moisture that rises, gathers, and travels southward in enormous airborne currents that scientists call flying rivers. Those invisible rivers of vapor carry rain hundreds, even thousands of kilometers, down to the farms of São Paulo, to the reservoirs that power the cities, to the very plains that grow the soy and the coffee that feed the world. The rainforest in the north waters the agriculture in the south. Cut the forest, and you do not just lose the trees, you risk turning off the tap for the richest, most crowded part of your own country. That is the trap Brazil is caught in. The agribusiness that clears the forest depends on the rain the forest makes. The knife and the wound are the same hand, and the hand is starting to notice. A country too vast for one world, and yet, in the end, plumbed by a single hidden system, north feeding south whether either half admits it or not. The great river gives up its secrets slowly. Let me take you to the people who are the river. Consider the scale of it, just for a moment. The Amazon River discharges around 209,000 cubic meters of water into the Atlantic every second, roughly a fifth of all the fresh water that flows into all the oceans on Earth, from a single river mouth. At its widest in the rainy season, it can stretch dozens of kilometers bank to bank, where the dark water of the Rio Negro meets the pale, sandy water of the Solimões near Manaus. The two rivers run side by side for miles without mixing, a seam of black against tan, the meeting of the waters, visible from the sky. This is not a river the way most of the world means the word. It is an inland sea that happens to be moving. At the mouth of that inland sea lies a scatter of islands called the Bailique, around 10,000 people spread across 51 communities in the delta, reachable only by boat. And there lives a man named Manuel Miraci dos Santos Filho, known to everyone as Miro. He is a community leader. His family has managed acai palms for generations, and he speaks about it the way a man speaks about his own body. I have 3 daughters, and 2 of my sons-in-law pick acai here, he says. He works alongside them, and his community deliberately grows other plants among the palms, he explains, to keep the forest diverse and healthy. That last part matters far more than it sounds, because Asher, the little purple berry that conquered the world, has become both a lifeline and a trap. Brazil produced 1.7 million tons of it in a single recent year. More than 90% came from one state, Pará. The berry that started as a quiet Amazonian breakfast, eaten with fish and flour, is now a global superfood shipped from Belém to smoothie shops on 4 continents. And the boom is changing the forest. To grow more acai, some producers strip out every other tree, leaving only the palms. Studies in the floodplain forests found that this single crop model can wipe out more than half the tree diversity of an area. The superfood that promises to save the forest, planted the wrong way, quietly kills it. Miro's community does it the old way, mixed, diverse, the palms grown among other species. They set aside 5% of everything the cooperative sells to fund schools, so the young people have a reason to stay. It is a small, stubborn act of resistance against a market that would rather have a monoculture. A palm can grow 80 feet tall. The berries ripen in long clusters near the crown. To reach them, harvesters still climb with a loop of rope around their feet, a tool called a piconia, the same way it was done 100 years ago. No machine has replaced them. In one of the most valuable food chains on Earth, the person at the very bottom is a man with a rope, barefoot, 80 feet up a tree, and he receives a fraction of what a single bowl sells for in a foreign city. The forest feeds the world. The world barely notices who does the feeding. Now leave the water, and let me show you what the water has been doing lately, because the Amazon is not just being cut, it is being dried. In October 2024, the Rio Negro, one of the Amazon's greatest tributaries, fell to the lowest level ever recorded at the port of Manaus. The measurements had been taken since 1902. In more than a century, the river had never been this thin. Boats sat stranded on cracked mud. Whole communities were cut off, reachable only by walking across what had been riverbed. Scientists found dead river dolphins along the shrinking banks. More than 40 million people live in and around the Amazon basin. For them, the rivers are not scenery. They are the roads, the grocery store, the water supply, the way children get to school. When the river dies, the world dies with it. One researcher, watching flow rates collapse, said simply that they were living through something that had never happened before. This is the paradox at the center of Brazil's forest. The rainforest makes its own rain. The trees breathe moisture into the sky, which falls again as rain, which feeds the trees. Cut too much, and the cycle can break. A forest so vast it generates its own weather can, past a certain point, begin to dry itself out. The lungs of the planet gasping. How much can you take from a system before it stops giving back? Nobody knows the exact number, and Brazil is the country that will find out first, whether it wants to or not. And in that drying forest live the people who were here before there was a Brazil at all. The Amazon is home to hundreds of indigenous nations, some in regular contact with the outside world, some still living in what the government calls voluntary isolation, having chosen, after 5 centuries of contact and its consequences, to want nothing to do with the rest of us. Their lands are not decoration on the map. They are, measurably, the best protected forest in the country. Where indigenous territories are demarcated, the trees stand. In 2025, clear-cut deforestation on indigenous lands in the Brazilian Amazon fell by a quarter, the lowest since 2016. The guardians, when the state lets them guard well. But the state does not always let them. In 2023, Brazil declared a humanitarian emergency among the Yanomami, one of the largest isolated peoples in the Americas, whose territory had been overrun by tens of thousands of illegal gold miners. The miners brought disease, mercury, and violence. Children died of malnutrition in a land that had fed their ancestors for thousands of years. The mercury poisoned the fish and the rivers and the people who drank from them. By the end of 2025, the government had advanced the demarcation of more than 27 indigenous territories, and indigenous lands now cover more than 117 million hectares, around 14% of the entire country. But in the same period, Congress, dominated by the agribusiness lobby, pushed a constitutional change, arguing that indigenous peoples can only claim land they physically occupied on a single day in October 1988. ignoring the simple fact that many had been violently driven off before then. The courtroom fight over that idea is not finished. When Brazil hosted the world's climate summit in Belém in late 2025, something unprecedented happened. Indigenous peoples arrived not as symbols, but as a force. Around 900 registered representatives, the largest indigenous presence in the history of these summits. They came by boat, hundreds of vessels in a river flotilla, and some breached the security lines of the conference itself, forcing the world's negotiators to reckon with the people who actually live inside the crisis being debated. One of them put the whole thing plainly, speaking for the traditional communities of the forest. It is us who live here, us who take care of nature, us who suffer the impacts, and nobody is paying attention. Nobody is paying attention. Say that again, standing at the mouth of the largest river on Earth, and feel how old it is. Now go as far from the equator as this country reaches, all the way south, to a Brazil that looks like a different planet. In the far south, Rio Grande do Sul, Santa Catarina, the tropics fall away. Here, the climate turns temperate, the winters can bring frost, and the faces in the street tell a different story. This is the Brazil built by 19th and 20th century immigrants from Germany, Italy, Poland. Towns with alpine architecture and Oktoberfests, vineyards and cattle ranches. The gaucho, the Brazilian cowboy, with his horse and his mate gourd and his own fierce regional pride. A culture that sometimes feels it belongs to a country of its own. It is one flag stretched across such distance that a family here shares almost nothing with a family in the Amazon but the language and the anthem. A single nation where you can find equatorial rainforest and near frost within the same borders and the same passport. And in 2024, this southern Brazil met the same enemy the north had met: water. Between late April and May, an atmospheric river, moisture pulled all the way down from the Amazon, parked itself over Rio Grande do Sul and would not move. Rain fell that should have taken 2 months in a matter of days. The Guaíba River rose past 5 meters, shattering a record that had stood since 1941. In Porto Alegre, a city of over 1 million, entire neighborhoods went under. The airport closed for 5 months. More than 90% of the state was affected, an area the size of the United Kingdom. At least 183 people died. More than 500,000 were driven from their homes. The state's own governor called it the worst disaster in its history. Behind that number are rooms like the one in Canudos, the state's third largest city, where 180,000 of its 350,000 residents were forced out of their homes. In a municipal school there, the desks were stacked against the wall and the classroom floor filled with mattresses and families. One of the women sheltering there, Ana Celia Alves, described the night the water came. They had no idea, she said, how big the tragedy would be. The lights went out, everything went dark, and only then did they begin to understand that this was not like any flood they had seen. In that same shelter was Maria do Carmo de Andrade, 78 years old, and her son, Alexandro. They had been pulled from the window of their second floor after waiting more than 2 days for rescue. He had pneumonia by the time they got out. Her son, she said, kept telling her the plain truth, that everything was gone. Everything was gone, in the richest, most developed corner of Brazil. And here, again, the old wound showed itself. The flood defenses of Porto Alegre had been built for the climate of the last century and left to age. A wall meant to hold back 6 meters of water reportedly began to fail at 4.5. The neighborhoods that suffered most were the poorest: informal settlements, indigenous villages, Quilombo communities. As one geologist in the region put it, watching the mudlines stain the walls a year later, we destroyed the natural systems that protect us. We deforested the hillsides, we filled in the wetlands, and now we are suffering the consequences. North and south, the message was the same. The Amazon dried, the South drowned, and the science pointed the same direction: a warming climate and a country that had not built for the future arriving early. The rainforest and the temperate South, as different as two places can be, bound together by the same rising risk. The great river gives up its secrets slowly, but some of them, lately, it has been shouting. Let me pause here, in the middle of the country, in the middle of the story, and give you something to hold on to. Because everything in Brazil comes back to one idea, and I want to plant it now, so you feel it at the end. The rope. The rope around the ankles of a barefoot man climbing a palm. The oldest tool in the newest economy. The forgotten worker at the base of a global fortune. Remember the rope. We'll come back to it. Now swing back toward the center of the continent, to yet another Brazil entirely, the Brazil of the wetland. Between Brazil, Bolivia, and Paraguay lies the Pantanel, the largest tropical wetland on Earth. It covers around 179,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of Uruguay. Most of it, 78%, is in Brazil. In the wet season, it floods into a vast inland sea. In the dry season, it drains into grasslands and forest islands. And it holds a secret that sounds invented. The Pantanel has the densest jaguar population anywhere on the planet. Here, the great cats grow larger than almost anywhere else, and they behave in ways found nowhere else, hunting fish and caiman instead of land animals, and tolerating each other's company in a way jaguars almost never do. In one protected stretch, a researcher once set up a camera and filmed a jaguar walking past just 7 minutes later. But the wetland burns. In 2020, catastrophic fires tore through the Pantanel and killed or displaced an estimated 45% of its jaguars, nearly 750 animals. In 2024, fire came again, the worst on record for that time of year. More than 1.3 million hectares gone by August. And then something strange happened. Researchers studying one remote, protected corner expected to find the jaguars gone. Instead, they found more. The cats had migrated toward the water, toward the last cool, wet refuge, and their numbers had swelled. Within a year, new cubs were born. The scientists began to suspect this floodplain was acting as a climate sanctuary, a place animals flee to when the world catches fire. The men and women who track these cats are not tourists. Fernando Tortato is a biologist who coordinates the conservation program for the wild cat organization Panthera in Brazil. He grew up in this region, and he has spent his career on a single stubborn question. How do you make a jaguar and a cattle rancher share the same floodplain? His work is fieldwork, signaling devices, GPS collars, long hours in a boat, because you cannot save what you have not counted. And the answer he and others have arrived at is not a fence, it is money. Ranchers who once shot jaguars now run lodges for the travelers who come to see them. The same men who hunted the cats now guard them, because the cats are worth more alive. On some ranches, electric corrals now protect calving cows during the jaguar's peak hunting hours, and calf losses have collapsed from dozens a year to almost none. The veterinarian Paul Rad, who has spent years studying these animals in the Pantanel, has watched young jaguars touch the fence once and never return. Jaguars learn quickly, he says. So do people, sometimes. It just usually takes a market to teach them. A caiman can live 60 years. A jaguar's bite can crack a turtle's shell. The Pantanel is older than any border drawn across it, and its rhythm, flood, drought, flood, is older than Brazil itself. The country fights over the wetland's edges. The wetland keeps its own time. And not far from that wetland, the land does something else entirely. It breaks. On the border with Argentina, the Iguasu River reaches the edge of a plateau and simply falls off the world. What waits there is the largest waterfall system on the planet. Not one cascade, but roughly 275 of them, strung across nearly 2 miles of cliff in the shape of a horseshoe. The tallest drop is 82 meters. That is taller than Niagara. Iguasu is nearly 3 times wider. When the American First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt saw it, the story goes, she said just 2 words, "Poor Niagara." At its heart is a chasm the locals call the Devil's Throat, where nearly half the entire river pours into a single roaring gorge, a horseshoe cliff 82 meters high and some 700 meters long. The mist rises more than 100 meters into the air, high enough to catch rainbows all day and, on the right nights, by the light of the full moon. The flow runs at roughly 1,700 cubic meters per second in ordinary conditions, and in flood, it has surged past 12,000. The surrounding rainforest holds more than 2,000 species of plants, hundreds of kinds of birds, jaguars, tapir, and swifts that nest, impossibly, behind the falling water itself. The Guarani people named it long before any European arrived, Iguasu, Great Water. Their legend says a god meant to marry a woman named Naipi, who fled downriver with the man she loved. Enraged, the god split the river itself, condemning the lovers to fall forever. Every empire that came after drew its borders around this place. The water has never once asked permission. It just keeps falling, the way it has for as long as there has been a river to fall. The great river gives up its secrets slowly. So does the wetland. So does the waterfall. So does the whole enormous, contradictory place. Now let's talk about the Brazil the headlines actually show you, because it too is only a fragment. And it begins with the most photographed city on Earth's most photographed coastline, Rio de Janeiro. The beaches, Copacabana, Ipanema, the sweep of the bay, the green mountains rising straight out of the sea, and above it all, arms spread wide, one of the most recognizable statues ever built, Christ the Redeemer, 30 meters tall on the peak of Corcovado, looking down over the whole improbable city. This is the Brazil on the postcard, the Brazil of the travel poster, the Brazil the world thinks it knows. And once a year, that Brazil explodes into the largest party on the planet. Carnival, millions in the streets. The samba schools of Rio, parading through a purpose-built stadium in costumes that cost fortunes, drum lines you can feel in your chest, a national delirium of color and rhythm and release. It is the image the whole world has of this country. Joy, movement, music, abandon. But look closely at where that music was born. Samba came up out of the hillside neighborhoods, the favelas, from the descendants of the enslaved. In the same communities, the state now raids with armored cars. The most joyful thing Brazil exports was made by the people Brazil forgot. The rhythm the world dances to was hammered out at the base of the same inequality that runs through everything else. Even the party is braided. Because right below Christ's outstretched arms, On those same green hillsides live hundreds of thousands of people the postcard never shows. And that is where the other Brazil begins. Come back to that morning in Rio de Janeiro, October 2025. In the hillside neighborhoods called Penha and Alemão, favelas, home to more than 90,000 people between them, 2,500 police launched a raid against one of the country's oldest criminal organizations. It was planned for months. It turned into the deadliest police operation in Brazilian history. More than 130 people were killed. The morning after, residents laid dozens of bodies out on the street and stood over them, shouting a single word: assassins. Others carried the dead down from a wooded hillside where they said the bodies had been left. The state governor called the operation a success. The president said he was astonished the raid had gone ahead without the federal government even being told. And here is where it gets harder than a headline allows, because when pollsters asked favela residents themselves, roughly 8 in 10 said they supported the operation. People who live every day between the sound of an alarm clock and the sound of gunfire, as one activist put it. People exhausted by a war they did not start and cannot leave. One community organizer, Raul Santiago, who lives in Alemão, put it plainly. When the state arrives with thousands of officers, helicopters, armored vehicles, and drones, he said, what it produces is not safety. He called for investment instead, in schools, in culture, in sport, in a future for young people. What residents feel, he said, is anger and exhaustion.